welcome. So thank you for joining us for the second session. We're going to chat with Marcus, who's the CEO of Ility. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I'm Marcus. Started Ility 4 or 5 years ago, and I say 4 or 5 because it was an idea and just a PowerPoint presentation for about a year, and then it had its first deployment a year later, right in the middle of COVID. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, but I started Ility in New York. I was based in New York, and I moved back home to Australia.
You missed the sunshine, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I missed, but we can discuss that later.
Wonderful. So when we think about what we're seeing in buildings, a lot of the focus is around who owns the building and how it's operated, but that's only a small part of the use of buildings, right? So tell us a little bit about what we're doing with it, or what you're doing with Ility, and why it's important.
Yeah, the way buildings are run, as Andrew pointed out, is changing a lot. A lot of complexity coming to the operations of buildings. And interestingly, a lot of landlords, and I'm sure there's a few here, and I'm focused a lot more on the financial performance of the building because they're worried about the valuation of the building as opposed to the actual operations and the revenue that's coming in from the tenants. And so they've outsourced that part of the business to third parties. And there's a lot of complexity coming at that, whether it's ESG, whether it's food and beverage, whether it's trying to create that environment that attracts employees, whether it's flexibility, whether it's services, whether it's amenities. There's a lot of stuff coming at them. And in order to tackle that, you really need automation. Like it's not just a nice to have, it's a must have. And from my experience over a long period of time, automation in a multi-tenant environment really drives profitability. It's an amazing difference, and we're showing that with some of our customers already. And yeah.
So on that automation piece, the lack of automation fundamentally drives cost into the business.
It does,
and reduces the ability to be flexible and effective.
It does,
right?
There's definitely
there's a real cost to not automating.
There's definitely two birds with one stone. So you are reducing cost, and there's a lot of manual and mundane tasks that are being done by people that don't need to be done by people. And in fact, I'm not trying to get rid of the workforce or turn us into a planet of robots. I am trying to create efficiency, and so that those people can have a better life-work balance than entering data into reports.
And drive value into the work that they do every day, right?
And then subsequently, create revenue opportunities by not just removing friction. Everybody talks about removing friction, but applying friction where friction is good, and then removing friction where friction is bad.
Right.
So there's good friction and bad friction. Good friction is creating an environment where you can get your employees to be in the right place at the right time to create productive friction.
Right.
And then bad friction is anything that gets in the way, or the way we put it, and the way landlords like to understand it, anything that gets in the way of a customer or a tenant and the space and their wallet.
Right.
So yeah, removing that friction.
Excellent. So when we think about how you're removing that friction, and as a platform, Ility, what are you guys doing, and how are you driving that from an automated standpoint?
Yeah, so there's a big difference between digitization and digital transformation. And a lot of people miss the nuance, and they're like, well, we've got a whole lot of digital systems, we've gone through digital transformation. But digital transformation is actually using that digitization to transform the business model. So the business model is actually changing. And so we've been very focused on that. And when we built Ility, I looked at a lot of industries that had successfully gone through digital transformation. And the one thing they all had in common was a really good distribution framework, right? So distribution became the key. Distribution's different to delivery. I view most tenant engagement experiences as delivery, but delivery can be done by someone on a bike, but distribution takes a lot of brains, right? So we are very focused on distribution. Packaging, pricing, and distribution for every interaction between every human and every building and every asset class is all I want to do. That's it.
Right. So what does that mean in real terms?
In real terms, it's there's a lot of good intent. There's a lot of and at the same time, for every new action or new product you create in a building or in the built environment, it adds a little bit of complexity. And so the aim is to use this wrapper of distribution to remove that complexity and have a really homogeneous way to distribute interactions between people and buildings. So really simply, Ility is a wrapper that goes around an interaction that says who can use it, how they can use it, where they can use it, and if they have to pay for it. That's basically what we do. And we do it exactly the same way for everything, whether it's a lease, whether it's connecting to Wi-Fi, whether it's booking a meeting room, whether it's viewing your bill, whether it's viewing your ESG data, whether it's having comfort and control and really distributing use of the building, so useful things to the tenants. And typically there's been a lot of manual tasks in between getting that done. But with automation, you can deliver it, create a better experience, and charge for it.
Right. So we've talked a bit about the idea of connecting a tenant who changes the temperature in their space to the carbon impact of that decision. So connecting the tenant to their lease, to the physical equipment that is being used to make the change they've requested, right? So the idea of creating an educational process, explaining to people how their decision is impacting the world around them. Now, Ility enables that, but we were talking yesterday about this idea of reversing that process, right? So taking the action away from people.
Well, the thing is that the way it is now, and my background is actually subleasing space, so in a flexible workspace context. And having been a tenant in like 150 buildings, to get the temperature changed is a process, right? And it's a process for a couple of reasons. One is the facilities managers don't want you touching that stuff. So it's like, nah, never going to give that to a tenant. Like, it's just not going to happen. And then it's also the complexity of how you deliver that outcome to the right stakeholder, right? So there's a lot of permissioning and a lot of really good distribution that needs to happen. And so when we talk about that interaction that we build the wrapper for, it's really about defining that interaction and then putting a whole bunch of rules around it that are going to satisfy the facilities manager and are going to satisfy the tenant and hopefully satisfy the landlord. And then it's a lot about data mapping as well, right? So data really comes into the picture. And when you talk about what we want to try and do is, so what would happen in the old day or now, I'm saying the old days, we still seem to be in them, is that the tenant sends an email to a facilities manager. The facilities manager sends an email to, or no, they might send it to a concierge or someone like that. They send an email to the facilities manager, and then the facilities manager sends an email to an engineer who might go down and change the temperature, right? There's just a bunch of manual processes there. And so removing those manual processes really removes so much friction. But then also the data that revolves around that is so important for that educational path that you're talking about, right? And what you can do if you've got really good permissioning and a really good distribution wrapper is you can do some cool stuff like define what are the parameters that the facilities manager is comfortable with the temperature being changed in. Map that data to not only the leasing data, so the space that they're actually the tenant is actually occupying, but also knowing exactly who the stakeholder is that has the ability to make that decision, and then informing them proactively rather than them going, well, it's a bit cold in here or it's a bit hot. And if it's cold, they probably won't do anything because they like it cold. But actually going to them and saying in a nudge that comes on their phone, on their device, it says, hey, you're responsible for the temperature in your premise. It's like 30 degrees outside. You've got it set to 21 degrees. If you set it to 22.5 degrees, no one's really going to notice, and it'll have this impact on cost and this impact on carbon. So, all of that can be defined in a single interaction. It's a simple nudge that goes to a stakeholder that's permissioned to do that. And then that can actually be a fully permissioned action that happens instantly and has really good results for the landlord, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and also for the tenant.
So it's really then about enabling people or tenants to have more active control, more information about the space that they're working in. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a bit of a motto that like self-service is the best service, right? So having a concierge is great, but I'd rather there was no human there. And, a good example is, I think it's the Peninsula have like on the Peninsula app, if you're like in their Diamond, like your Diamond Club, your phone works now on the room keys, right? And you don't have to check in. Like, it's great if you go to the VIP counter and you don't have to line up, but imagine if you didn't even have to check in. And when you walk into the premises, it wayfinds you to your room and you tap your phone on the key and you don't even have to talk to a human. Now that's much better. And I got a really hard to spell surname, and I used to travel a lot, so I had a lot of really perks when I went to these hotels. And they're like, "Would you like us to come up to your room to check you in?" Like, no, I really don't even want you to be here. Like, get out of my face. And then they would spell my name wrong in chocolate on the welcome Mr. Mufarid's thing, right? So get that right. Get that right. Don't worry about checking me in, and just let me check myself in. That's self-service is the best service.
Right.
Yeah.
Leave the chocolate, right?
Exactly.
No, excellent. So we're working together on a deployment in Brussels,
Yep.
which we're very excited about.
Yeah.
We're starting that process now.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about the project and effectively what we're doing.
Yeah. Automation is better with good data. If there are landlords listening, like, get that right. Get it right. And the great thing about this particular building is it's like Schneider top to tail. So it's that makes stuff a lot easier, right? So we're really good at mapping across really complex and different systems that have no naming conventions. Getting the data right at the start is really, really important. And it's actually not that hard, particularly if you're using like a middleware wrapper like Ility, right? Because our first job when we go into a deployment is to uniquely name everything, right? Uniquely name the space, uniquely name the tenants, uniquely name the leases, uniquely name all of the, anything that we call a product or that interaction that I was talking about. They get a UUID, which basically uniquely identifies them. That is the absolute key to automation. And so going into a greenfields building with a uniform supplier of BIM and access and everything else makes life a lot easier. So it's going to be a really incredible showcase of what can be done if you get it right.
So effectively what we're doing is we're linking all of the services together. We're driving standard use case into a mobile experience.
Yep.
And making sure that all of the potential interactions are linked to the space that is then available to the tenants based on what they're allowed to
Absolutely.
use. So again, this is really interesting thinking is how we're linking tenants to operation.
Yep.
And making sure that we're allowing the right people to do the right things.
Yeah. Yeah. And then taking that automation all the way through the back end as well, right? So everybody focuses on the back end of buildings, which is interesting. It's created a unique space for us to play. They're all focused on what the investors of the fund think, as opposed to how the tenants are actually interacting. That back end is quite important too, right? But if you've got your data ducks in a line and you've got good automation in there, then extracting the analytics from how the building is being used to educate decisions on how you want to then distribute the product is really, really valuable. So the building is evolving in a much more educated way.
Right. Excellent. So it's pretty exciting space, right?
Very exciting.
Where is Ility going? What is your intent with the business?
I mean, I want to be packaging, pricing, and distribution for every interaction between every human and every building and every asset class. That's all.
That's it. Just a little piece. Right?
Just a little piece. I just want to be distribution. We don't necessarily want to be doing visualizations and even building out the use cases, right? We're saying distribution's important. Everybody should embrace distribution as a concept in how people interact with their buildings. It should be done in a uniform way, not point solution, point solution, point solution, point solution, point solution. And if that happens, then you get that ubiquity. We just want to be ubiquitous.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
So excellent. Marcus, thank you for the time.
My pleasure.
We are excited about the stuff that we're seeing as we work together, and we look forward to seeing where this goes.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.